What's good, YouTube? Steel here, and with the official release of Triumphant Light, we now know the contents of the set. Thus, I will be going over the entire card list, as well as ranking the cards from best to worst and everything in between. Feel free to comment down below if you agree or disagree with any of my takes, as there is like cards or interactions that I might overlook as I'm doing the tier list. If you enjoy this kind of content, I do tier list style videos for every set as they drop. I also do deck breakdowns, solo battle guides, and metagame reports. So if any of that interests you, please consider subscribing, as I try to upload daily and there's much more to come. Anyways, I feel like that's enough like self-promotion for one video. Let's get right into the set breakdown, and above all else, stay pro. As the intro broke down, we're going to be looking into every card in the set, as well as like ranking the ones that kind of matter. And what I mean by that is like this list is going to be a lot more clean than the one I did for Space Time, as Space Time was like a blind react, as we got the entire set list the day before the set came out, so I was actually able to like rank the cards as I was reading them for the first time. In this case, however, I have an idea, if not completely know everything that's in the set. For example, like Heracross right here, which is the first card in the set, had I just seen it blind reacting and saw 3 energy for 50 damage, I would think this card is abysmal. Now, knowing that Barry exists to like make it a 1 energy 50 that potentially hits for 120, it's still a bad card, all things considered. But that's an example of how it's easier to rank the cards now, knowing like the full context of like what the set comes with. Thus, as we saw, I'm going with Heracross as I will go fun rogue strategy, because on paper I don't see this making any relevance like in the meta. But I could see somebody just like, whether you're a fan of Barry, or even like using the Barry card for like maybe like solo battles or something, I could see Heracross coming in handy. Heracross is like a fan favorite, at least it is for me, but I did grow up with Gen 2, so I'm like a little biased. Going to the next card, these are the type of cards that aren't going to be on the list, because on the tier list itself, because Burmy is just the basic Pokemon, 50 HP, 20 damage for 1 energy. That's pretty generic. That's like almost like a standard. Give or take, some basic Pokemon have like certain abilities or special like conditions to their attacks that kind of make them better than others. But for cases like Burmy, they won't be on the list. I just feel like getting that out of the way, so like further on it doesn't, because like for example, if this evolves into something really good, it doesn't, this card could literally be blank and we would still play it, right? That leads to the third card, which is Motham. Motham is a 2 energy, 50 damage. It does evolve from Burmy, which, full transparency, I had no clue this card existed, that the Pokemon itself existed. But card for card, 2 energy. The fact that it's colorless is like what kind of like sells it for me. But this card's just bad. Like, I don't see where in any world where you would play this over like the Wormadam Metal. Granted, like it's just not a good card, right? And then we have Combi. Combi again falls under the generic basic Pokemon that does 20 damage. Then we have Bethwickling, which for 3 energy, reckless charge. It has the same HP as the Space Time like counterpart, but however for 1 more energy it does 120. Granted, it does 30 to itself. Technically, it's better in my opinion than the one before, but Combi's draw, in my opinion, is the Call a Friend that brings out any basic. And I don't know if you would ever build up to this. Technically, it's a 1-point Yamega, but also not technically, because Yamega EX is colorless, like generic. It works with Dialga, it works with so many cards. This, I guess, would kind of work with like a Leafeon, but there's so much better targets that, as much as I want to call this card like a fun rogue or whatever, it's just a bad card. It didn't see any relevance, like the Space Time version didn't see any relevance, and this card's not necessarily any much better than, or even like relatively, it's the same card, right? Then we have Cherubi, falls under the standard, but Cherubi actually evolves into 2 different targets. We have Sharam for 1 energy Worry Seed. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Confusion. I don't know if you guys tried Miss Magius. If I have a list of Miss Magius that I had a whole bunch of fun. It made for some crazy gameplay. Like luck was definitely involved, as I stole some games that I didn't deserve to win, but it's all due to the confusion mechanic. So I can see how this would be like a fun rogue, but overall there's just better cards that do confusion. The 40 damage is pretty low, as well as 80 HP is just not gonna cut it. So I'll go bad. And then we follow it up with the other evolution, which is for 2 energy Leech Seed, which is 60 damage, and then you heal 20. Again, healing 20 when your max is 80 is just too low to like consider or even look at. So just honestly, like going into this, as I was reading cards as they were getting leaked, there was nothing I was like fully hyped about, and that's why we might edit the tier list as we go to like fit the description of this set, because Space Time did have some broken cards. As we saw, Darkrai is broken. Magnezone, I actually underrated, but Magnezone, thanks to the Magneton from Genetic Apex, is super broken cards. I don't know if we have anything that inherently lands in that spot, but we'll see as we go through. Maybe I change my mind as we go. Then we have Carnivine, which is like the only rare in the grass slot, which is power link, so it's every link ability goes hand in hand with Arceus. And we have here, if you have Arceus or Arceus EX in play, attacks used by the opponent, I mean by this Pokemon, do 30 damage to your opponent's active. So basically this is, if you open with this in Arceus in a grass deck or a grass pile, you have your own Skarmory basically without having to play tools. So this is a card that I could see being playable, and the only issue is that once you start playing Arceus, it starts leaning towards like Executor. Like, why wouldn't you play Executor? So I could see Carnivine Executor Arceus being some kind of a deck. Although I was truly hoping this set brought something that would like just completely overpower or kind of like dissuade people from playing Executor. But here we are with a card that almost like helps the strategy indirectly. And last but not least for grass, we have Leafeon, the only EX for grass here. That Force Breath, once during your turn, if this Pokemon's in an active spot, you could take a grass energy and attach it to one of your grass Pokemon. So technically, let's say you're going second, you start Eevee, attach an energy pass. The following turn, you evolve into Leafeon, use its own ability, as well as your energy for turn, and you can start swinging. A thing to note is that you don't even need to play grass energy in your deck to swing with the Leafeon. All you need is the Eevee and its own ability. So I could see this deck, this card being used. It could ramp up Celebi. It could set up like Yanmegas. It's like a mini Manaphy that can actually attack. It's almost like a Grass's own version of Moltres is how I look at it. I would say this card's good. But I didn't even rank the Carnivine, my bad. Yeah, both of those are good. When it comes to fire types, Gen 4 is very limited, and it doesn't change here with Triumphant Light in the mini set, as we only have 3 additions to the card pool, which is Houndour, or Houndour, however you want to pronounce it, which again, we've gone over the fact that it's just a basic with 20 HP. I'm going to repeat it a bunch of times, unfortunately. But then we have an Arbok for fire, which on paper, I don't see how much playability it's going to have due to, it doesn't have like a strict like strategy that it falls into, sort of like Arbok clearly bounced off of Weezing. I don't know where Houndoom lands ideally, but I do want to put it at least under playable, because I'm just such a fan of Arbok that I can't see like a fire Arbok being bad, especially when I'm talking about like what decks could bring down the power level of the Executor, even though I do believe Dark Red Magnus was the better deck, and I also have a video on that, but that's not here nor there. What I wanted to focus on is the fact that if I'm a fan of Arbok, I'm a fan of Houndoom, so maybe I'm being biased, but I have to believe it's playable. And then the last fire we have is Heatran, which is another Pokemon that, thanks to the Arceus, it has the Arceus speed link, which is honestly one of the better ones, where it's the fact that if you have Arceus or the EX, this has no retreat cost. So you go from, if you're building an Arceus deck, yeah, you have the versatility of like what typing you choose is kind of where it goes. But the fact that if you, let's say you build a fire version or some kind of like generic version, like, because Crobat basically goes into all of them. You don't really need to attack with the Crobat. So like, let's say you're doing like Heatran strategies. Heatran's not only a 110 wall, at any point you could just swap it out for either Arceus when it's ready, or for any other like attacker. Like to a certain extent, you don't even need to attack with Heatran. You could just use it as a wall that could come out at any moment as you build up either Crobat or Arceus. And that alone has to make this card playable. Whether it's good or not is going to be something that like the format will show. I don't want to feel like I'm like overestimating the ability of like these. I almost feel like I'm overhyping the Arceus cards, but I think it's also going to fall under good, because trust me, there's a few of these Arceus cards that are really, really like not that good. So let's just go over the water Pokemon. All right, so when it comes to water Pokemon, when fire only has 3 Pokemon in the set, but you give water so many, it seems like a little biased, but who am I to judge? Also, they got their water, also got a supporter card that we're going to be going over. But when we go into water, you got Mero, again, falls under the standard cards. We have Azumarill, which is 100 HP for 2 energy to 60. I want to say this is bad. Like, Water's toolbox is so large. They have so many options, so much powerful cards to go into. Manaphy to ramp quickly. Cards like this just fall way too far off. Like, they're not, I don't think they're like relevant enough. And that's the same feeling I have for like the next line, which is the Barboach. Barboach falls under like the standard thing, and even worse, because it, for just an extra energy, then it only does 30. But then Wishcash, 4 energy. Granted, I did mention Manaphy, there's Misty and stuff that can ramp it, but then all it does is 80 damage, and then you flip a coin. If heads, it goes all the way to 140, but if tails, you do 20 to yourself. Again, when there's like, even like the baby Blastoise is a better card than this. Granted, you need a stage 3. But it just goes to show, like, cards like these are just bad, like, in my opinion. just because of how many other cards exist that do exactly the same or much better for either less energy or an easier retreat cost, or it's just sometimes there's certain cards that get made that make me question like what their angle is when they make them. And let's go to the next card, Snorunt. We gotta skip that, and then we go Frostlass. Frostlass, which also where's my Glalie? Am I missing something? Whatever. Gen 3, Gen 2. Well, where's our love? But whatever. We got Blizzard. Blizzard's an attack we've seen like on many cards already, and it just depends on like the power level. Here it's for 2 energy, 40 damage, and it's spread damage 10. It's a good ability, but again, you have Articuno that for 1 more energy is doing a lot more. And then there's Palkia that for an extra energy past the Articuno is doing infinite more. And then 90 HP is like not a really good slot to be in. And when you're weak to steel, that means like if you're playing Snorunt, like being weak to steel and Skarmory being in the same format just doesn't go well. And your Snorunt could be like knocked out by even a Dialga swing. This is just as much as I like Frostlass as a card, it's just bad. Then we followed up with with Snover, which not much to say about that. And then we have another RCS card in Abomasnow. If you have RCS or RCS EX in play, attacks used by this Pokemon cost 1 less, so it becomes a 2 energy 80 attacker. Which now we're speaking a different game here. This one is the first RCS card that is not gonna be good in my opinion. I do think it's playable though, because 2 energy 80 is huge. It's one energy cheaper than Articuno. Granted, it is a stage 1, but I feel like there's ways where this could be pretty good. For example, like this is almost close to like Starmie levels, and Starmie X is one of like the best cards. Granted, you can't retreat as easily as a Starmie, but you're also just 1 point, right? So there's like a give and take there. That's why I have it under playable and not good. Like Starmie on set release would be something I consider broken, and nowadays it's something I consider good. This is just playable because it's like a cheaper version of cards like that. So with that in mind, yeah, I don't think every RCS card is gonna be broken, but I feel like how generic and splashable RCS is as a whole makes all these cards at least at the minimum playable. And I guess as we go on, we'll be able to confirm or deny that. We then have our first Water EX here in Glaceon EX with Snowy Terrain during your opponent checkup. If this Pokemon's in your active spot, do 10 damage to your opponent. So technically, you're doing 100 damage at like minimum when you're swinging with Glaceon. It's as far as like how good or bad it is, it's kind of like debatable. 3 energy 90 does seem a little weak, and then there's also better ways like in water alone. I feel like the Vaporeon from Mythical Island that lets you play around with your energy is a better card. I want to put this as much as I want to put it in good because the artwork, especially the Rainbow Rare, is beautiful. I'm gonna go with just playable. Like you could fit it, it's gonna be like a fun card, and hopefully I'm wrong because I really like Glaceon. I played it a lot. I played a lot with it in like Nuzlocke and stuff growing up. That's all I have to say about Glaceon at like face value. Then the other 2 water Pokemon in the set are Origin Form Palkia, which is a 3 energy Snow Smash 60. Flip a coin, if it does 60 more. That just has to be bad. And then we got Fion, that's 60 HP, so it's like a generic basic, but 2 energy Water Pulse, and then it also puts the Pokemon to sleep, which is interesting because Water Pulse I'm pretty sure confuses, but whatever. Nor here nor there. I think that's just a bad card. It's way too weak for 60 HP. I don't know if I would consider Fion like playable at all. And speaking of Fion weaknesses, now we go into Electric, Lightning, which is another type that didn't get much love in this set. There's only 4 cards under this typing, which is a brand new Pikachu that has a 1 energy Spark attack that's 10 damage, but it also does 10 to a Pokemon on your bench. I mean, on your opponent's bench. So I kind of want to put this at playable because being realistic, every Pikachu card is basically interchangeable as its preference mostly. Not much of them don't do more than like 20 damage on average. But the fact that this Pikachu does spread damage basically allows your Lightning decks, whether it's a Raichu deck like with Surge or some kind of like Pikachu EX deck, this Spark attack is gonna make Cyrus very like viable or a lot stronger in that deck, as you're able to like pinpoint what you want to target. So that's why I think this Pikachu is a little bit better than the other ones that we've been given. And now we have Raichu that's actually an RCS card with Resilience Link, which means it takes 30 less damage from attacks, which is good in a walk perspective. It's bad in the sense that this Pokemon only has 90 HP, so technically you could look at it as it has 120 HP the first time they swing. Then if they're not swinging for like to knock it out in one hit, then the resilience becomes a little more viable or a little more interesting. Its attack though is for 2 energies, 40 damage Spark. This attack also does 20 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So once again, this entire Pikachu line is like doing spread damage, making Cyrus a very good card in the lightning type or in the lightning strategy. However, I want to lean towards this being like a fun rogue strategy. I don't picture this being too good. Again, the 90 HP is a little low for me, even with the resilience. It's not the best thing you could be doing with Arceus. And lightning's in a spot where like the best way to use it is a Pokemon that doesn't want to use lightning. Like it produces it itself, so you're not using it as a whole. So it's kind of sad that lightning didn't get too much more support in this set, because currently it's being used the most by a deck that doesn't even like primarily use the energy source. But now we lead to Electrike, which again, just generic 60 HP basic Pokemon that does 20 damage. They love printing these. And then Manectric. Manectric has actually an interesting ability, due to the fact that I feel like it's already a mechanic in the game, right? They got Flash, 40 damage during your opponent's next turn. If the defending Pokemon tries to use an attack, your opponent flips a coin. If it's tails, the attack does not happen. That's just confusion, right? I'm aware that electric attacks don't confuse in like the games or in the, I guess, in the, I don't know where they get their references from. But you could at least, like, I don't know. It's already a mechanic, and they just decided to write a paragraph under that does confuses, right? If I'm missing something, please comment down below. On paper, it reads just like one energy, 40 damage confusion, which again, I feel like puts this card in like fun rogue, because I would want to put it in playable, but it's a stage 1 and it only has 90 HP, so it's actually, let's put it in playable to not contradict past me that's just a big fan of like Rapidash and those cards that are just generically aggressive just for 1 energy. Let's put him, let's give him some respect. He's definitely playable, closer to good even, but it's a Rapidash. But even Rapidash got kind of like power crept at this point, so I don't want to put it in good, but playable definitely seems fair. For better or for worse, Psychic types got like an interesting allotment of like cards in this set. Starting with Clefairy, which is a generic basic Pokemon that goes into Clefable. For 3 energy, Moonblast, 60 damage. During your opponent's next turn, attacks used by defending Pokemon do 30 less. Honestly, this is pretty brutal. I just don't see a world where you play this. Also, being weak to Steel, we've gone over how popular Skarmory is. Other people are using the Alga, and it's just not it. That's all I can say. So let's just jump to the next one, which is Ghastly. Ghastly is actually an interesting card, colorless, so it doesn't even have to like go into a Psychic deck, unless depending on what it evolves into. But flip a coin. If heads, your opponent reveals a Pokemon card, a random card from their hand, and shuffles it into their deck. So we have Hand Disruption. There's the entire deck that I tried to build, and I never posted it because I couldn't find a list that I felt comfortably telling you. But I enjoy the idea of like using a deck that uses Mars, cuts their hand down to like 2 or 1 card, and then just eating it away. Ghastly doesn't work for that, because if you're Marsing them down to 1, Ghastly is like your last point, right? So, but I feel like over other Ghastlies, this could be interesting, and it could be annoying from time to time. It definitely falls under like fun rogue, in my opinion. Although Gengar as a whole falls there, like the strategy. But let's look into what it evolves into, right? So now we have Haunter. So there goes out the window the strategy of using like a Gengar list that doesn't focus on Psychic type. But yeah, we have Mumble. This Haunter is basically the same thing as any other Haunter. It's worse in my opinion, because the other one's doing 1 energy 30. So you could actually like go into the baby Gengar, you don't have to play the EX, but I guess if you're playing the EX, you don't mind adding the 2nd energy to Haunter so that it could attack. And then it's also evolved into this Gengar with Hypnoblast for 2 energy. It does 70 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. Personally, this is pretty good. It's like a baby Wigglytuff EX version sort of thing, where you have 140 HP, you're dealing 10 less damage, but you need 1 less energy. I think this is definitely playable. And I almost want to like extend and try to put good. The only reason I don't want to put it in good is the fact that it is a stage 2. Like Wigglytuff, would you put Wigglytuff in good? Is what it comes down to. Almost due to like the power level of like this set, I want to put it in good, but maybe like it'd be like the top of playable if we were like ranking that, but we're not doing it that way. But yeah, I would just consider it playable, maybe good. I might change it by the end of the set, because currently we have nothing unbroken. So now Unknown, 20 damage, generic. Once during your turn, you could choose either player. Look at the top card of that player's deck. Fun card. It does work while he's on your bench, so that's interesting. I'm gonna put him under Fun Rogue, because in my opinion he's kind of bad, but I can see how it's like you could do a fun deck and put him there. It definitely replaces like Porygon when people are using Porygon just for the data scan. You might as well play Unknown instead, unless you're playing like a Porygon deck, but that's a completely different like strategy. So I would put Unknown on Fun Rogue, and I could see people playing it. I don't know. I don't know if it deserves a slot when our decks are already like 20 cards, and as more cards get printed, those slots become more like precious or more important, like card by card. But let's just jump to the next one, and the last psychic Pokemon in this set is Rotom, which has the speed link just like the Heatran we covered, and it is generic in the attack. Dash attack, it does 20 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So there's a world where this just replaces Azelf from like the set. If you're playing Azelf, you could play Rotom instead. Now, whether it's like Arceus worth, like, maybe I'll put it under playable. It's not one that would consider good. Heatran at least is 110 HP, so it's kind of bulky. It's also a fire type, so if you're using it as like a fire, if you're actually using the attacks of fire types, Celebi is one of the most important, like not the most important, one of the most popular decks. So you know, has like kind of use there. It also like has super effective against Dialga and other cards that might see use just due to like how popular the Pokemon is as a whole. But overall, I couldn't blame somebody for using it, so that's why I'll put it under playable. Now we're looking at fighting types that got a lot of love in this set, as well as like Pseudo, like for example, even Sudowoodo got a 1-star version of it, which looks great, but nonetheless, let's just start with breaking down what it does. It's 1 energy, 20 damage, fighting headbutt. If your opponent's active Pokemon is an EX, it does 30 instead. So in terms of like starting against a Manaphy or an Execute, it's not really doing much. But against other leads like a Palkia, maybe 18 trainer, especially like 18 trainer Pachirisu, you start swinging for like 7, like you two-shot a Pachirisu with a Sudowoodo, even if they have Cape. Granted, if they heal and stuff, it's a different story. But I could see this card as being playable. As far as like good or strong, it's kind of debatable. Maybe you replace Hitmonchan because you're sacrificing 10 damage for the potential of like the upside that you're hitting for a lot more if they have an EX. And especially if like Arceus and stuff like that become popular, you're gonna see a lot more like. Then you also have the super effectiveness, so it's definitely playable. Actually, I'm leaning towards good. I'm gonna put it towards good. Maybe I'm overhyping, maybe I'm overthinking it. But in a fighting power where you're like fitting Lucario with Hitmonchan, you might as well replace the Hitmonchan with Sudowoodo, and you have that upside where like if it's an EX, you're swinging for a lot more damage. So it's just 1 energy also. Like the commit, I guess. Oof, I just realized the two retreat cost. That's a little pricey. I'm gonna leave it at good though. I'm gonna trust in my gut that told me it's good. Phanpy is the generic 60 HP basic that goes into Donphan. Donphan is a 3 energy, 120 HP. During your next turn, this Pokemon's rolling sprint does 60 damage, so it's an extra 60 damage. So it's basically a Togekiss that requires 1 more energy to attack, but 1 less like evolution, so like 1 less card, so it's like a less bricky version. But it also doesn't have Cynthia to help it, right? So I think I'm gonna put it down to Fun Rogue. I could be wrong. It could land on playable, but I think too much has to go right or wrong in the format for this card to be like that good. And that leads to Larvitar. Did I skip something, or do I have it in the wrong order? Okay, no, it's just wherever I copied it. It's a little off in the order down here, but we got Larvitar being the generic thing. It goes from 2 energy, then 3 energy. So it's like a perfect curve after turn 1. Like you are like an energy late, but once you get the second energy on Larvitar, you go Pupitar for 3, and eventually it leads up to Tyranitar, which is also an Arceus card, which has Power Link, which means it does 30 extra damage if you have an Arceus. So you're technically swinging for 160, which puts it right above, like, I guess, Rhyperior. I don't have the exact numbers for Rhyperior off the top of my head, but 160 knocks out a lot of Pokemon in this set. However, it feels a little slow. The 4 energy retreat cost is kind of crazy. I think as much as I love Tyranitar as a card, if you haven't noticed by every video I make or every comment I make, I'm a very big fan of Gen 2. Granted, I did go back and play the games, and they are slow, and the mid game's horrendous, and the post game is like the levels are all over the place. But it's what I grew up on, so it is what it is. And all that to say, Tyranitar is fun/rogue. Not to say it's bad, although it's kind of bad. But you know, you're pulling on my heartstrings, I'll put you in Fun Rogue. Then that leads us to Nosepass, which Nosepass on itself, I guess this one's fine because it has an extra HP and it swings with just 1 energy. So it's like, if you plan on just swinging with Nosepass and evolving into Probopass as fast as possible, this one's a little bit better because of the HP. But realistically, it's irrelevant. It's just a means to an end. It could, again, these are cards that could say absolutely nothing, and you'd have to play them if you want to play the evolutions. Which leads us to Meta Type, which again, they love printing 60 HP, 20 attackers. And leads to Metachan, which is 100 HP, kick shot, flip a coin if tails, this attack does nothing. Personally, I hate coin flips, but I could see how this is like playable. It's basically like a strong, it could, on paper, it could be a stronger Mankey and Primate line if you're ballsy enough to like focus on the coin flips. As much as I want to say it's playable or whatever, I'm gonna have to put in a Fawn/Rogue because actually, you know what? I'm gonna go all the way to bad because there's cards that that's just a bad take. That's a bad take. It's not a bad card. Honestly, if you start hitting, if there's people that are playing the Mankey that flips a coin if to hit 50 off rip, this guy does 80 for the same just one energy. 100 HP is pretty respectable. But it's not. I don't know. The same though. I'm more confident of saying that Sudowoodo's good than I am of saying that this guy's playable. But yeah, overall, I'm gonna leave it there. At the end of the day, this card's not gonna see that much play in my opinion. We'll see how that ages. We followed up with what everybody I think was hyped about, which is getting Garchomp the heck out of like Dragon type. And like we're aware that Garchomp is Dragon type, but Dragon types in these games are just so piss poor. Druddigon does not count because what makes Druddigon good is its ability. It has nothing to do with the fact that it's a dragon. So we have Gible, the standard. Then we have Gabite. Gabite. Actually, let's go back to the Gible for a second. Something about Gible. There's a world where you actually still play the Dragon Gible because of the lack of a weakness. And the Dragon version of Gible is still it's one colorless energy for a 20 damage attack. It's the exact same card basically, face to face, like, but you remove the weakness. So it's basically give or take. Do you prefer to have the advantage against things that are weak to fighting, or do you rather eliminate the weakness that, for example, like if people are playing Executor, you don't want to like take 40, like an extra 20 until you like build up to your 170 attacker. So that's one thing to keep in mind or like consider when building a Garchomp deck. But yeah, that's one thing I wanted to mention. Gabite, this Gabite does swing for just one energy, doesn't require the water energy, so I would go like maybe Dragon Gible into like the rest of the line being from this set, and that all leads to our EX Garchomp EX for one energy. It does 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. A good effect, anything that spreads damage, especially if in a fighting deck, so you already have him only like tagging the backline all game. When you build up to Garchomp, now you hit something for 50. It also sets up your Cyrus, like a Cyrus play the following turn if you're building up to Dragonclaw. Dragonclaw is 100 HP, I mean 100 damage. I have to put Garchomp under good. I don't think it's broken by any means, and I don't think it's bad, but it's not that good. It doesn't synergize with Cynthia, which we all knew because the fact that Cynthia does not specify EX means it doesn't play with Garchomp EX. But it's definitely more playable than that Garchomp, in my opinion. And linear attack, going linear attack into Dragonclaw with like cards like Cyrus or whatever, it's not that bad. And then also the fact that it hits 170 HP is huge. It puts it alongside like Gallade and other cards like that. So if Gallade's capable of winning tournaments, although Gallade's upside is a lot larger because it could swing for upwards of like 110, 130, whatever. I do agree. I do believe like Garchomp will see playability just because of the popularity of Garchomp, and you can't deny that the fighting toolbox just works. And also the upside of Garchomp to Gallade is that at least the entire line gets bumped by Lucario, which I guess goes back to maybe you play the regular Gible, I mean the Gible from this set, just so that Lucario bumps it regardless. But I guess we'll see as the meta develops and evolves where Garchomp ends up landing. I do believe it's a good card. It's gonna see a bunch of play just because of the popularity of the card. As far as consistent topping, time will tell. Now we go into what has to be my favorite type in the Pokemon Pocket as a whole, Dark, which we finally get Crobat. But before we get to Crobat, we have to look at Zubat. Zubat does 1 energy 20 damage, followed by a Golbat that for 1 energy does 30. And then we finally get into Crobat. But before we get into Crobat, I want to mention that I do believe if you were to play this line, I think you would play the Golbat from Genetic Apex, because although you're sacrificing the 10 HP, you are adding 10 into your damage, as well as it's a colorless energy. So like, let's say you're just playing Crobat for its ability next to like an Arceus / something list, you're able to play the Crobat. Like, yeah, your Crobat can't swing, so I'm not saying this is like how I would play it. I'm just saying that you get more versatility from the Genetic Apex one. But all that to say, Crobat is a great card. I'm gonna put it in good. I don't want to put it in broken. The fact that you do need Arceus, the fact that it only hits the active, it's a great card. I just don't want to say broken, if that makes sense. is that I guess I almost want to change broken, because if nothing falls under broken, I'm gonna adjust my list. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it in good. The upside is there. There's definitely a bunch of strategies that work with it. I've already seen a bunch of like concept lists that people have posted that I'm like dying to try out myself. And I can't knock the fact that it does have. I can't knock the fact that you're sacrificing some HP, but for more consistent attack from like in the sense of it's basically a Greninja, and Greninja's been a dominant like a meta threat. Not as like it's never the main attacker of a deck, but it's definitely always been a pest and in the background. So I can see Crobat, Arceus slash literally anything, and I'm excited to see what people cook up. I've seen Dark Rarest. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but anyways, that's all to say that Crobat is just another Greninja, and Greninja's good, Crobat's good. Now we lead to Krogan. The only thing to say about Krogan, because it is just a basic, is another target for the Galactic Grunt supporter card that we got in Space Time, and that leads to Toxicroak with the attack Toxic, which is literally what Toxic does in like in VGC, which is it poisons, but instead of doing 10 damage like regular poison does, it does 20 each turn. As nice as this card like is in concept, they could just switch and change it, and it doesn't really do much, and it's not actually applying pressure, and it's just 100 HP. I almost want to put it in front rogue again because I'm just a fan of dark type, but it just seems bad. Krogan as a whole, like even the ones from the set before, I'm just not a fan of coin flips. So like everything that like this Toxic Croak line is trying to do just puts me off. I'm not a big fan of. So let's just jump into like steel types. Metal got so much love in this set with its own Magnezone line. It got another Bronzong and another Bronzong, another Probopass, but we'll get to it. Starting for Magnemite again. I sound like a broken record, but they sound like they're just copy and pasting their cards. So who am I? Who's in the wrong here? And then we go to Magneton. It's a 90 HP, 230. Personally, not a big fan of this, but I'm trying to think. Is there a world where you would play this Magnemite instead of like the ones from that we're playing currently? And I don't believe so. I still believe the one with the generic being able to do 10 damage is better if you're playing Magnezone in a deck that doesn't use Lightning. Okay, and it all leads up to this Magnezone, which is another link, but Resilience Link. It takes 30 less damage from if you control Arcs, and if you control an Arceus, then it's a 3 mana 80 attack. I don't know where I fall under in this strategy. The fact that you can't really ramp it, maybe if you're playing like a Dialga Arceus Magnezone list for some reason. This one is gonna fall under Fun Rogue, and it's nearing bad, honestly. But yeah, it's a nice concept. It is taking 30 less, which is something to keep in mind. And then there's also the support card that does 30 less than that. And I can see how it's resilient. And then you add Cape, and it has a whole bunch of. But then to what end, right? You're just doing 80 HP. You're weak to fire, which maybe doesn't matter. But if people are still on Charizard, it depends where the format goes. But I don't see this card doing too much. Then we have Mawile, which are a colorless, so that's good to keep in mind, I guess. 20 damage, and then 20 plus if your opponent's active Pokemon's a metal type. It does an extra 30. What concept were like in the format we're in? I guess it's like format dependent almost. Like, and if this deck, if Pokemon Pocket had like a side deck, maybe I don't know. I have to put this in bad in my opinion. I don't see where this deck fits. Like where this card would fit in a 20 card pile where you're like, yeah, this is what I want to play. Then we have Probopass EX, defensive unit. During your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 20 less damage from attacks. So this is technically you would play with Dialga or some form of buildup. I guess I'll put it under playable. If it's almost like one EX where I'm trying to put it into perspective in which world where I would feel okay with playing this. Because 90 is fine. You have 160, then technically you go up to like 180. Nothing's like really one-shotting you except for like Charizard. Then you could add Cape. It's pretty resilient there as well. I guess if you could build it up, I'll put it under playable. I'll leave it at playable. I don't think it's good, but I don't think it's terrible either. Its art is one that is disturbing to me, but we don't have to talk about that. Bronzor is generic. Bronzong. This Bronzong, I'm gonna put it under playable mainly because it's just a lot better than the Bronzong from Space Time. And the Psychic Attack is one that we've seen multiple times. We've seen it on Jinx. We've seen it on Alakazam, and it's basically the in-between. It's slightly stronger than Jinx, and Jinx is a basic, and Alakazam's a stage 2, so the stage 1 is somewhere in between. and it is 3 colorless, so it's pretty generic. Although the main way you would use it is just like with Dialga. So I'll put it under playable. Maybe it lands closer to fun rogue. Again, I might play around with what I call the different tiers, but with that, let's go to the next card. We have Origin Form Dialga, which 3 energy, time mash, 100 damage, flip a coin. If tails during your next turn, this Pokemon can attack. If it had like a lower retreat cost, I feel like I would feel better about this. Realistically, I don't see a world where you play this over Heatran. I do understand that Heatran like self-harms when it attacks, but at least it consistently attacks and it could keep on attacking. So I'll put this on bad just because there's literally a card that's better, that does everything that this card could do, just better. And I understand that 3 retreat cost is more expensive than 2, but Heatran, once it gets in there, is basically fighting till it gets knocked out. So I don't know. Although there's a world where I guess I could. It's tough, right? Because I guess there's a world where it's the same card, and worst case, if it does get tails, then you start playing around with like swapping it out, and then okay, I convinced myself to put it higher. I'll put it on playable because it does essentially do the same thing as Heatran. It doesn't hit yourself, and it has a little bit more. It's not. I'll put it on playable. I'll put it on playable. It's better than I initially thought. Let's go with that. Alright, so we have another Eevee, Snorlax. This one has collapsed and then it falls asleep. So there's like talk about like, oh, you just put Lumberry on it so that it swings and it just wakes up right back, and then you get to swing again the following turn. And then we're like, oh, it's 4 energy, but then there is Berry that makes it where you can swing it for just 2 energy. So, but it's like a lot of hoops. You know what? I'll just put it in like Fun Rogue. Because like, again, it falls under the same theory as Heracross. Like if you want to make it work and you want to have fun with like a Lumberry strategy and Berry, like it lets you use cards that wouldn't see play otherwise. So I could see like the draw in using that, but not much more than that. Then there's Hoo-Hoo, which is the basic Pokemon, and then Knocked Out, 100 HP, 2 energy, Silent Wing, 50 damage. Your opponent reveals their hand. I don't want to put it in good because it is pretty weak and it doesn't do too much. But I want to put it in playable because anything that's like lets you see your opponent's hand. I know I just talked bad about, you know what? I'm gonna put it next to Unknown. And I have to bite my words from earlier where I said like, oh, all you see is like, basically if I attack you for 50 damage and I see, oh, I explode, I have no way of winning this. But there will be a case where you'll see like, oh, you know exactly what to play around. Oh, like I can't take this damage, or I should heal here, or I should do this. But it's also like a turn slow. It's almost like worse than, in the sense of like, what makes it worse than Unknown is that you can't react to the information you're given the second you see it. But what makes it better is that you see a lot more information. So I'll put them hand in hand in like a Fun Rogue. I can see it being playable, but I'll leave it there. Then we have a new Starly lineup. We have a Starly that doesn't take out the tools, so I kind of feel like it's worse. But again, they just love printing 60 HP, 20 attackers. It leads to Staravia, that unlike the other one requires 2 energy to do 40. The HP is the same. It's kind of like, I guess, since you're still building up for a 3 energy Staraptor, unless, you know, I feel like they're interchangeable. I might lead to the Staravia just because of the fact that Berry does exist. And then we have this Staraptor that's 150 HP, just like the other one. But this one does 130 and also does 20 to itself. The only thing, or like the positive, is that with the Berry card, you actually do 130 for just 1 energy. It's basically a Rampardos at that point. So it's give or take what you think about that. I honestly think the fact that it requires, I want to put it on playable. I almost want to put it in good. It's just because with Berry, it's just I don't know. I can't find it in myself to put it in good. Like it's just, I'm gonna leave it there. Then we have Shaman. I'm gonna put this in good. As long as this Pokemon is in your bench, your active basic Pokemon has retreat cost 1 or less. And there's a lot of decks, like for example, like a Darkrai, it becomes retreat for 1. Although I wouldn't fit it into that deck, but it's just giving examples. Like there's so many good cards. Your Dialgas, your Palkias, that just making it cost 1 less is huge. Like you don't have to worry about Leaf. Or then there's this is one of those where like in the beginning I said like if I miss something or I overlook a card, I'm sure if I look card by card, there's so many instances where Shaman becomes a lot better than what I'm giving credit for, and I'm already calling it good, right? it might be one of the few cards here that on its own just goes to broken based on like what cards get released in the future and what cards I'm not thinking of right now that just like skyrocket in playability due to the fact that the retreat cost is either reduced by 1 or reduced completely by this effect. And I'm sure either the comments will let me know or the tournament like breakdown, like the tournament metagame will eventually evolve to let me know or confirm my suspicions, right? Then looking at the last two normal Pokemon, we have Arceus, the basic, like the baby Arceus, which personally I guess the reason it's playable is because you might like want to play a copy in certain decks that are like focusing on the Arceus play, but you don't want to play a card that's 2 points. Like if you're not thinking of using Arceus as an attacker, that's what makes it like playable. Or maybe if you want to up the amount of Arceuses you have to make all your Arceus cards live, you might play like 2 EXs and 1 of this copy. So that's what I would think would be playable. And then we have the main event, like what everybody is like playing for this, or I guess what the entire set is revolved around. It's Arceus EX. It has Fabled Luster as the ability. This Pokemon can't be affected by any special conditions. And 3 energy, ultimate force, 70 attack. 70 damage. This attack does 20 damage for each of your bench Pokemon. So it's basically a Gallade that doesn't care for what your opponent has going on. And it's also just a basic, right? So there's a case that the fact that it inherently creates so many other like playable strategies with all the cards that essentially focus on its existence. But I still don't know if I would consider it broken. Like your top is 130. It's definitely the best card in the set, right? So I guess we would put it in broken. Before I go too into the Arceus, I want to break down the last 4 cards in the set and then re-evaluate the actual tiers in this list. This set actually refused to print any like item cards, so there's no new tools, which I was kind of like hoping to see. Although I guess it could make like cards like Skarmory or Pachirisu a little too strong if they print out too many tools too fast. And then there's no item cards. Although I wouldn't personally know what to print because I see people like, oh, they should make rare candy stuff. And I do believe those cards are a little too good for the current state of Pokemon Pocket. But nonetheless, let's break down the 4 supporter cards that they gave us. Which one is Irida. Heal 40 damage for each Pokemon that has a water energy attached. I personally believe this card is closest to broken as there is. The fact is that it heals, like Erica is playable in every grass deck. You play it in every grass deck. It heals anything for 50. Imagine a deck, like let's say Arceus, where you're playing Manaphy. And like you could be playing a deck that's literally Manaphy, Arceus, Yanmega. Something like that. Where they're all like generic stuff. Or let's say like that Bronzong that we saw earlier. Nothing has anything to do with water. And you're just building up because they use generic energy. And then you just go, yeah, I'm gonna heal my entire board for 40. That's kind of crazy. Like the fact that you could heal up to 160 in one card, like in theory. I don't know. I have no words. In 18 trainer Articunos are like, or even like 18 trainer Palkias that I've seen. Although I feel like Articuno is a better way of playing it. Think about 18 trainer. Think about like it's just such a good card. And speaking of 18 trainer, I think it got a huge boost from the fact from this card, Celestic Town Elder. I didn't know this was a character. I wasn't expecting it. It was like the last supporter that I pulled when I was opening my packs. Put a random basic Pokemon from your discard pile into your hand. The reason I say it's gonna be like generically, I'm gonna put it in the good. Like any deck could play it, but in 18 trainer, I feel like in a deck where you only have 2 Pokemon and they have to knock it out, they'll knock out your first one and then like, oh, we just have to beat this. There's so many games that I've beat 18 trainers, especially Pachirisu, but that's where, yeah, we knock each other out, but then they never have a bench. This kind of fixed that. It also gives them more longevity as they're able to switch around. I know cards like Cyrus and Sabrina like completely nullify this, but just having that option, and it's also, there's still 18 trainer lists where they're playing cards that they don't necessarily want to. It's just you're limited to what you have, and this is just an example of like a really good card. Then we lead to Barry. Barry, I'm gonna put under. I almost put him in playable, but I think it's just fun rogue. It goes along like. I guess Staraptor is good enough where. Yeah, like if you play Staraptor, you're playing Barry, but if you're playing Barry, you could be like, it's just like a fun strategy, I feel, which might like take down Staraptor. I could be proven wrong if Staraptor like consistently like becomes like some kind of Rampardos deck somehow. But on paper, it's almost bad. But I, as a fan of like trainer cards and like character decks and stuff, I'll leave it as a fun deck, even Rogue. And then the last but not least, we have Adamant. Alright, which during your opponent's next turn, all of your metal type Pokemon take 20 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. Ideally, I don't know how good this is. It depends how popular metal is. Would you play this with like a Skarmory? I don't know. It could be like a one of in a Skarmory list, but then a Skarmory with what? And then I'm gonna go with playable, because I guess if you're playing metal, there's no reason not to play a card that says, yeah, I'll take 20 less damage next turn. Okay, imagine Melmetal. Melmetal's already taking 20 less, so it's taking 40 less. That's almost like low-key good, right? Like, it starts, like, if you start putting it in things like that, it starts becoming like very. That's why I gotta put it in playable, because I don't think it'll make like Melmetal like the next tier 1 deck. So that's what broken would be. It's not good in the sense that not every deck is gonna play it. Which I guess then you could say like, oh, then the old Tiki Lady could go down. But I think old Tiki Lady is what I'm sorry for just obliterating that poor lady's name. Celestic Town Elder is a lot more generic. Well, it's definitely more generic and more playable, which is, so I'm gonna go with it's good, and I'll leave Adamant in playable. So that's the final tier list. I'm gonna reevaluate in my head and see if I'm gonna change anything, and I'll cut to that. After thinking about it for like a very short amount of time, I ultimately decided to leave the tier list as is. It's pretty indicative of what I believe. It's gonna be easier to just look back and like rank it or rate how well or how off or how on point my opinion was. The video maybe got a little lengthier than I anticipated, because I had a lot more to say than I thought about than I anticipated to have. But yeah, overall, I do believe that RCS is the best card in the set. Like by far, bar none. Granted, it was a set completely revolved around making Arceus a deck. The Arceus deck as a concept is gonna go throughout so many iterations, which goes hand in hand with like Arceus as a Pokemon. Like there's different like versions of Arceus, so we'll see like fire decks, we'll see grass decks, we'll see a plethora of like decks that are just mixing a whole bunch of things. Because like Crobat technically doesn't need a swing, so you can put Crobat. Or same thing with Heatran. Heatran technically doesn't need a swing. You can just use it as a wall that backs out for free. So I'm excited to see what people, and including myself, like cook up with Arceus. I hope you enjoyed the content. Once again, if you do enjoy this type of content, please subscribe. I do it every time a set drops. I'll break down what I believe the deck is, kind of rank where the cards are, bring up a few strategies here and there of what could be used or what people have been talking about online and on YouTube videos. Overall, all I could hope for is that this set sort of like mixes the meta a bit. It got kind of stale towards the end. And a month from now, we're going to get ranked battles, so who knows what comes out of that. Maybe we'll start seeing decks pop out of nowhere for this. And we won't get a new set for a whole 2 months from now. So hopefully this set shakes up the meta enough, because honestly, we're going to be here a while. I feel like I've been talking enough. You guys get the idea. I hope you enjoyed the video. Consider liking and subscribing, and above all else, stay pro.